Hey, welcome back to Faith, Frauds, and Falsehoods, where we talk about cults and their impact on the world around us. Tonight, we're going to add an extra bonus episode on our Scientology discussion. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Before we begin, let's just be clear. The opinions that we present are ours alone and do not represent the views or opinions of our respective churches or employers. Now let's begin.
All right, so Matt, you wanted to do a super short recap kind of episode. What do you want to talk about?
You know, in the middle of us doing this whole series on Scientology, where we've been studying into it, reading and all this, and then we're doing these videos and podcasts telling about it, there's been a trial on in the news lately with Danny Masterson. He's a famous actor. He was played on The Ranch. He was on there for a couple of years. He was on That 70s Show.
Okay.
And some other stuff. The Ranch was a very popular show on Netflix. I know pop culture is not your big thing there, Brian.
Pop culture is not my thing.
But he is very recently, just a few days ago, was convicted of 2 counts of rape. Right. He was being persecuted for several different counts of rape, but it convicted him on 2 counts.
Prosecuted, not persecuted.
Prosecuted.
Yep.
The church alleged he was being persecuted.
Right.
And that they also alleged that religion had nothing to do with this. He's a Scientologist, but Scientology had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecutor brought Scientology up in the case, in the court, not just once, actually brought in other people to talk about Scientology, some famous ex-Scientologists, and really discussed how Scientology affected the whole situation. This is one of those cases where we've seen a lot of this lately with the Me Too movement and a lot of victims, really bravely stepping up, where often in cases of rape, women feel like it is something that's their fault, that they caused, or they're powerless to do anything about it. And this was a classic example of that. He raped these women because he knew he could, and he knew he could get away with it. And for 20 years, he got away with it. And now he isn't getting away with it. Right. And the prosecution alleged that Scientology had something to do with that culture of getting away with it.
Yeah, some of the things that I read this afternoon about it, the victims report that they had been previously Scientologists, right? When this happened and they took it to the ethics board, right? If you remember back a couple episodes, we talked about this internal ethics committee that Scientology has. And so they took it to the ethics board, and then they were the ones put through the ethics training, right? And they were made to feel like it was all their fault.
Right? Scientology teaches the concept that when bad things happen to you, you did something to draw it in. You did something to cause the bad thing to happen to you anyway. So that when you put that into a situation of sexual assault like this, you're blaming the victim.
Yep.
Not to mention, we talked about the Good Old Boy Network. We talked about how they value some Scientologists over others. Danny Masterson was more famous than all of these ladies.
And higher ranking.
Yeah. And so, because of that, it appears that the Church of Scientology tried to protect him.
Yeah.
They persecuted these women. They went after them. One of them alleges that somebody kept poisoning her dog, two of her dogs, poisoned and killed her dogs. They had people taking photos. These private investigators we talked about were following them around, them and their families around. And they put out statements, just condemning the prosecution during the case and saying that it had nothing to do with Scientology, and it was just all completely made up. They had ex-Scientologists come on and talk about the fair game practices and things like that. Scientology denies any of that.
Now, what is the fair game practices?
That's where they will basically do anything necessary to go after an enemy of the church.
Right. Okay.
Anything. That's where they'll trash them. They'll lie about them. They'll do anything to make an enemy go away. They say that policy was stopped in 1968 by L. Ron Hubbard. But as you found studying his letters, there was no policies that have ever been stopped.
Right.
But he was prosecuted.
He was, and found guilty of two.
Found guilty of 2 of the 3. I should mention that the case had to be tried twice. The first time it was tried, they had a completely hung jury.
Right.
There are people who think maybe the jury was hung because maybe some of the jury was gotten to by the Church of Scientology. We don't know if that's the case or not, but we do know that in the second time he was tried, out of the 3 charges brought, 2 he was found guilty of. The third one, the jury was hung.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't convict him.
Right.
So now he's in prison.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. It's sad that the church fought against this, but it's great that he went to prison for his crimes and they can finally get some justice 20 years after it happened.
Yep. I saw somewhere it was 30 years to life.
Yeah, for each count.
Yep.
So let's hope for double life.
Now, as we wrap this up, we wanted this to be short. I want to be sure that we're clear, right? This is not the Church of Scientology did wrong by covering this up, right? This is anyone who covers this up is doing wrong, right? I will be the first to tell you, right? If it was a Christian church, we would be saying the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
Right? This is wrong, right? It should have been dealt with in 2001, 2002, 2003 when it happened.
And you should never make a victim feel bad
exactly
for being a victim.
Right.
But we did want to make sure we covered this since we were covering Scientology. We didn't want to leave this out of the record.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, thank y'all. We'll see you with our next one.